Hello, today's video is going to look at the proper way to punctuate dialogue, the proper way to handle direct speech which can pop up from time to time in the stories, the imaginative writing tasks that you produce. Luckily, most students tend to grasp where the speech marks or quotation marks go, which is great. Sadly, that's only half the battle. I tend to find that even the most prodigiously gifted English students tend to falter when it comes to placing the other punctuation marks required when there's dialogue in a sentence. So, very quickly, very simply, let's clarify, let's correct. Now here's a line as it might appear in your story or whatever piece of imaginative writing you're working on. And you'll notice it's not punctuated yet. What you've got here is direct speech, the actual words, the exact words of the speaker. And here you can see that I've perfectly punctuated that line that I stole from an old cowboy film. Now you'll notice I've put the comma before the dialogue. I've even put it before the speech mark too. And because it's the first bit of dialogue, it requires a capital letter to kick it off. Now in theory, you can put that comma within the speech marks, but what I'm showing you here is kind of standard format. In that last slide, you saw how to punctuate dialogue when you mention the speaker first. You know, Kane says, whatever Kane said. Here I'm going to show you how to punctuate when you're mentioning the speaker after the dialogue. Now clock that inspiring motto from mountaineering monarch Edmund Hillary. That's a motto to get a lad off a couch on a rain-sodden Sunday. Let's look at how we punctuate it properly. And there you are. Now, even though you've written old Edmund Hillary's, old Eddie Babes's full sentence there, you round off that line of dialogue with a comma, not a full stop. The full stop, of course, goes at the very end of the entire sentence after that word Everest. Here's a tricky Doohickey Fear. How do you punctuate questions when they bob up in some punter's dialogue? I'll tell you, more than a few bright young students, bright young things get bamboozled by this, so let's roll out a clear definitive answer. And like anything from basket weaving to bomb disposal, it's easy when you know how. You put the question mark at the end of the dialogue, not at the end of the entire sentence. Let's step it up again now and consider more complicated applications of dialogue. Take this line from darkly comic zombie classic Dawn of the Dead. When a character spouts this line in the film, competent actor that he is, he leaves a dramatic pause in the middle to generate tension. Now there's a lovely way of doing this in story writing that's a little bit more subtle than just simply tonking in that ... ellipsis. Let's have a look. Observe them. When there's no more room in hell, said Peter, the dead will walk the earth. And you'll notice that said Peter acts as a dramatic pause in the dialogue. You'll see a comma ends that first section of the dialogue, and there's also a comma kicking off the second part. Now, the second part of the dialogue here is just a continuation of that sentence. It's not a new sentence, and therefore we don't need to put a capital letter for the in the dead. Which begs the question, what do you do when you're breaking two complete separate sentences into dialogue? Now granted, you could just say, Luther said, warriors, full stop or exclamation mark, come out to play. But have a look at these two sentences here. The one at the top, that's obviously one sentence. The one at the bottom is two separate sentences. They're both punctuated correctly. Let's see on the next slide how we can punctuate those two examples as speech broken into two sections. And there's your answer, or answers. Now in the first example at the top, a bit like we saw with the sentence from the zombie film, you've got a lowercase c kicking off that second section of the dialogue because that second part is a continuation of the sentence. At the bottom, you'll see you've got a full stop after Luther, and naturally a capital C commencing that second part of the dialogue, which is of course a separate new sentence. The last big headline to remember about dialogue is to have a separate line for different speakers. Never have two characters' dialogue appearing on the same line. That's sloppy practice. Examiners give that a big fat thumbs down. Do it like I've done here in this tense exchange between two characters in sci-fi classic The Thing. Right, let's summarise and get gone. Forget about Romeo and Juliet. The real love story of our times is Mr. Taylor and a sizzling meat pie. See how the examples of dialogue here work to reinforce, to remind you of the key rules for punctuating speech and applying capital or lowercase letters as appropriate. And so rounds off a masterclass in punctuating dialogue. Now, frankly, I don't think you should be adding too much dialogue to your imaginative writing pieces in high school English. It can look a little bit juvenile to an examiner's eyes. You're far better off focusing on description and action rather than conversation. In any case, you now know how to punctuate correctly direct speech in an editor or examiner pleasing fashion. And it only remains for me to wish you the very best of luck in that exam hall.